Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight and welcome to our online event through Westminster City Council. Tonight's event is Barging Free with Alan Denman. Alan has recently published a book, Barging Free, where he shares his experiences in an hilarious, heartfelt and sometimes harrowing account of life on a narrowboat. Join us this evening for a practical and inspiring insight of a journey from London landlubbers to full-time narrowboat liveaboards. Please feel free to ask any questions anytime through the Q&A button. We'll be having a question and answer session afterwards. So without further ado, I am delighted to introduce to you Alan Denman.
Hi, everybody. It's me. I'm Alan Denman, and very happy to be here with you all. And we've got quite a lot to go through in a short while. So let's get on. Yes, as you can see, I've just published a book. I live on a narrowboat, and I've been living on it for 5 years now with my wife. And we also have a pusscat who's just behind my computer here. She may appear at some point, so don't be alarmed. But she's just been fed, so she's probably fairly docile. So let's get a move on. Let's look at this. What are we going to be talking about here? All right. Okay, hang on. We're just a little tech. Here we go. So first of all, look on the left-hand side. And so the topics we're going to be looking at is what it's really like to live on a boat, all right? The history of the canal system and how that brings us up to the present day. Why live on a boat at all? And what do you need to learn? I'm also going to be talking about something called the hero's journey. I will offer you tips for buying a boat, and there is a free PDF on what questions to ask yourself when you're thinking of buying a boat, and that's available, and I'll talk more about that at the end. And also, quite simply, how to buy the book. Now, if you look on the other side of your screen, this is us, Ash and me, standing on the bow of our boat. And I had this idea, like for the front cover, it'd be like the Titanic, you know. And, you know, this is them when they're standing on the bow of the boat and they're sailing into this glorious sunset. But you'll also notice that there is a terrified duck up in the corner. And then you will also notice that there are flames coming out of the boat. So here, that sort of, it's comic, but it also does encapsulate the beauty and romance and the horror and the disasters all in one. And that was very much like our first year. And that is all described in the book. Okay. So first of all, I've got to broaden things out and put things in context. This is me, age 4, with my father, and I was a brilliant at whistling, by the way. I don't know how that happened, and I had a very good ear for melody, for very young. And my first song that I learned to whistle and sing is "I Love to Go A-Wandering" with a knapsack on my back. So there was something of the adventurer in me from very, very early on. And I think this is a sort of thread that goes through my life, and you'll see other examples of this. So let's have a look at the next one. Right, so this is our narrowboat. And why are they called narrowboats? Well, very simply, they're very narrow. They're about 2 meters wide. Our boat is 70 feet or 22.5 meters long. So it basically is a steel tube. And you have the bow at the front, with a fender on hanging down, that sort of big black baskety thing, and then you have at the back, you've got the stern. There's Aisha, my wife, on the stern, and the engine is down there. So for anybody interested in technical stuff, it's a 38 brake horsepower. A very simple idea. It's really a tractor engine. So it's an engine that isn't designed to go fast. It's designed to pull a lot of weight. How much weight? Well, our boat probably weighs about 25 tons. Now you think, oh, that's horrifying. I don't think I could ever do that. I've got to cruise and control a 25-ton boat. But bear in mind that you only go about 4 miles an hour. And sometimes you're going so slow that the people walking on the towpath are walking faster than you. But that's okay, because you don't really want to go fast in a narrowboat. That could crush other boats. So very quickly, an overview. You have narrowboats, and they could be anything from 30 feet to 70 feet long, different sizes, and they're all about 2 meters wide and a little over 2 meters high. Some are a little bit higher than others. And then you've got wide beams. Now, wide beams, as you suggest, they're all like wide narrowboats, really. And they can be anything from 10 to 14 feet wide, sometimes even a bit wider. And they are much more spacious, of course, inside. So the interesting thing when we first got our boat is we realized that there were some design issues. How do you live in and redesign a tube of steel? A couple of other things to say. The boat is made of steel, and this is actually a livable boat made in 2003. So it's not that old, really, as narrowboats go. And it's not designed for going across the channel, although it has been done. Fewer people have gone across the channel in a narrowboat than men have landed on the moon. So there's a little interesting statistic there. So there is no keel to this boat. It's a flat-bottomed boat designed really to go up and down the canals and the rivers of England. So let's move on a little bit. And hang on a minute. Let's just go. I need to go back here. Why we don't appear to be going, we appear to be going forward now. Can you?
Hang on, I'm going to step in as Alan's
my technical assistant here.
Yes, how do we go forward? How do we go back? I think it's like that. There we go.
Go back. There we are. Stop there.
Oh, stop there. Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that.
So just before we continue, sorry, can I just interrupt one moment? Alan, are you able to turn your video on?
Oh.
Yeah, I thought we had.
Okay.
Wonderful. Yeah. We can see you bright and clear. That's fantastic. Okay. Sorry for the interruption.
So I hope everybody can see me now. So here we are, standing on the gunwale of our boat here, and you can see our solar panels behind there. Now we'll deal with that question. That's an electrical question, and that is the name of our boat, Follow Your Bliss. So I'll talk more about why we named it that in a little bit. So here we are, we're looking very relaxed, but as you'll know, as we get into the stories of what happened to us in our first year, it wasn't always as relaxing. But so far, I hope, you know, you thought, well, it's beautiful. You know, you've got beautiful water, you've got light, you've got nature, you've got a lovely boat. You're not going very fast. You're 4 miles an hour. Perfect. However, what I would like to do now is read you the opening of the book. Okay, let's just put the camera on as well. There we go. So are you ready? Okay, hang on, we need to shift the
camera here. Here we go.
Thank you. All right, just shift that down. Okay. It's dark. It's cold, icy cold, the kind of cold that burrows into your bones and gnaws at you like a malevolent field mouse. And it's damp. No wonder it's damp. We're floating inside 25 tons of British steel on a canal in the middle of England, in the middle of winter, in the middle of nowhere. Coughing and choking, we stumble out of the boat onto the towpath, pursued by billows of black, acrid smoke. In the far distance is the sound of a fire engine siren circling, but never getting any closer. I stare at my wife's horrified face. She's on the phone. It's urgent. The fire engine isn't any closer. It can't find us. We're panicking. Dimly, I hear the operator's voice on the other end. My wife is yelling down the phone. We can hear you, but we can't see you. I'm sorry, madam. We just can't find you. Can you give me any other description of your location? I don't know, my wife yells back. We're by a field. There's a tree, lots of trees, and there's some other boats. Whoomp, whoomp, whoomp. A monstrous noise from within the stern of our boat grows louder by the second. Billows of smoke are now pouring out of the windows. We look at each other in terror. In the distance, the fire engine wails again and again, as if in commiseration. Please hurry, my wife pleads down the phone. I think it's going to explode. Are you both off the boat? The operator asks. Yes, yes. But as I hear these words, I think to myself, no, this can't be happening. We've only had the boat 3 days. There must be a way to save it. I realize there's only one thing I can do. It's now or never. Quickly, I slip back onto our boat and descend into the fumes.
Are we on the wrong slide?
Need the video on.
Oh, sorry, guys. Here we go. Just make sure our video's on. Right. There you go.
Okay, we'll catch up in a minute. That's how the boat the book begins. And it was, you could say, literally, moving onto the boat literally was a baptism of fire. So we're just going to pause there for a moment, and we'll come back to our boat and what happened to us and so forth. I'll explain what the fire and the fire engine was all about. But it was extremely dramatic. So first of all, we're going to go back to the beginning of the canals. Just put it in context. What are the canals? The canals are a combination of man-made waterways and converted rivers as well. And really what kicked it off was a young chap called the Duke of Bridgewater, who was about 23, and he owned a colliery in Worsley outside Manchester, and he was producing coal, and he wanted to find a way to transport the coal into Manchester because he could make a lot of money that way. And eventually the bill was passed in Parliament and he was given permission to build a canal, but only on the agreement if he sold coal of 4 pence per hundredweight to Manchester Industries. Times have changed since then. The cost to him personally was £168,000 or 3 million in today's currency. And it opened in 1761. And what that did is that really was, in many ways, the canal here opened up the canal system. This accelerated the Industrial Revolution. So move on to the next slide. So for 150 years, the canal system of England helped to take raw materials, coal, wood, wool, to different parts, different cities in England, and also to transport goods to the ports that could be exported elsewhere. People don't really understand how important the canal system was. Another thing, if you look up in the top left-hand corner, you see a woman on the tiller of this. Now, the women were really strong, independent characters. And, often they'd be holding a baby in one arm and working the tiller as well. They worked very long hours, and there was often a race to see who could get to the delivery point first of all. So they were competitive with each other, but there was a camaraderie. And if you go on the canal system, there are these still, in many places, lovely old pubs where you could leave messages and information. And sometimes if you had too many kids, you'd farm your child out to another boater, and that was quite acceptable. And then you cross and meet each other and everything else at some point on the canals. They lived in extremely small space, and the bottom left-hand corner is a boatman's cabin, and they're so very cleverly designed so that shelves would fall out, things you could pull out, and very neat. And they really looked after things very carefully because they had to. If you've got children and husband and wife in a small space, you really had to look after it. The engines were looked after as well. Sometimes if they didn't have enough room, somebody or some of the kids would sleep in the engine room as well. So that's just a little something here. Let's just have a look at a map of the canal system now. There we are. So you can see the blue lines are rivers and the red lines are canals. And you could see that really, in effect, what it did, it connected, the West and London, the Midlands and the Northwest and the Northeast all together. So there was a complete transport system. So you can think of the canals, even though things move very slowly by today's standards, this really was like the motorway system in the 18th and 19th century. Okay, so that's a little something. Anything else to say about that? Yes, if you look in the center, where roughly Birmingham is, you see there's quite a lot of intricate canals there, and Birmingham is sometimes described as the Venice of England because there are lots of little canals. They went to various warehouses and delivery points, pickup points, and so forth. It was Birmingham was a major manufacturing center in England at the time, but it was pretty much in the center of England, so they had to get stuff out to the ports. Okay, so that's a little bit of history there. So now the canal system was effective really from about 1761 at Duke of Bridgewater up until the 50s. There were still commercial boats going at that point. But by 1950s, really, it's pretty much died out. So pause the tape. Let's just quickly say something about our background. Okay, I've talked about the spirit of adventure in me. And in a previous life, in this life, really, a previous version of me, I would say, I was a screenwriter and filmmaker, lived in Los Angeles for many years. Here we are. I know we're doing a tourist shot here under the Hollywood sign. We just couldn't resist it. And I made a feature film there. And it was great, really me bumping into Bruce Willis in a tea shop and, all kinds of wonderful stories and things happened to us. And eventually, bottom right-hand corner, we had been stretching the visa system a little bit so we could stay there, and we got our visa cancelled, and we had 24 days to get back to England. So we come back to England, and it's now 2012 when we got back, and we thought we have to reinvent ourselves now. I didn't get the big Hollywood break. Spielberg didn't get in touch with me. I don't know why not really, but there you go. And we came back to England. It's now 2016 and it's January. And I'm just going to read you a little bit from here, just from the very opening. And this gives you an idea of what led us. So where does this story begin? It doesn't begin with a fire, that comes later. And it doesn't begin with a collision or drowning, though both are entirely possible. Nothing so dramatic. It begins one grey, miserable January day in 2016. Christmas is long over. Any Yuletide sparkle faded away like fairy dust. New Year has come and gone in a flash in January. The month of depression has arrived. Divorce Monday, post-Christmas consumer debt, stacks of rejected presents to charity shops, a month of grim sobriety. I think we all know what the month of January can be like. And I'm depressed. And I realized that what's depressing me, I'm in my 69th year, and I think, if I want to live in London, London is expensive. And I'm going to have to work to the end of my days. And how can we do that? I don't know. I don't want to do that. I want more time to write. I don't want to having to be doing things that I don't particularly love and grinding away. So we thought about that. One of the things we thought of doing was buying a rundown farmhouse in Spain and converting it and running workshops there. We soon realized that was a rather wild idea and would have been enormously hard work, and my Spanish wasn't up to it. So then we come back, and we come back to 2016. Now we start to think about, right, we start to think about what other things we could do. And our goal in all this is we like living in London, and we want to say, is it possible for us to own our own home and live in London? And, Aish had already said to me, well, we could live on a boat. And I said, no, never, ever. I will not live on a boat, too cold, too damp. And I have a fear of drowning as well. So no, that didn't happen. But then our friend, life is funny, isn't it, like that? When you think you're so set in your way, then another bit of information comes along. And our lovely friend, her name is Adele, already had a narrowboat. And she says, you can live on a narrowboat in London. And if you move every 2 weeks, you don't need to pay any mooring fees. And, you could get probably quite a decent one for 24,000 or more. And then you can sell it again if you don't like it. So you won't lose any money. Well, this sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? But at this point, something goes click. It's like, I can almost hear the cogs in me going round. And I'm going to introduce to you something now called the hero's journey. Now, I was already aware of this from screenwriting, because a lot of films are based upon the hero's journey. It's an archetype or story pattern. And so here again, just an example of this. Remember Star Wars? That film was based on the hero's journey, but it also applies to real life. So when Aish and my friend Adele finally convinced me that a narrowboat is the answer to our predicament, I know in my subconscious something happens. I know I've just received my very own call to adventure. I feel it viscerally, a sort of non-verbal in my solar plexus, and a Notre Dame bell gongs within me. So something happened to me at that point, all right? Said, this is a call to adventure. And I love the hero's journey as a story pattern, and I love adventure. So I'm afraid I did say, okay. So let's move on to the next slide. So just very quickly, what is the hero's journey? And thing is, you yourselves, especially if you have had a dream, have something you really want to do, and it seems so out of your comfort zone, so impossible, but then some of you may have had this experience where somebody comes along and says, I'm meeting my friend tonight, and he's got a place that, up in the Yorkshire Moors, or he's got a boat for sale or something like this. You might want to come along and meet him. That may well be a call to adventure. So the hero's journey is this: you're stuck in your familiar world, which is where we were in Richmond and Twickenham, and really sort of stuck, and it's a stalemate. And then I got the call to adventure. And so you set off. And when you get to the call to the adventure, some people refuse and say, no, I'm just staying put. I'm not moving. I'll stay here for the rest of my days. But, I like the hero's journey. So I'd said yes. And then you start to cross over into an unfamiliar world. So you go really from your comfort zone, your familiar world, into an unfamiliar world. And then a series of things happen to you. There are definite stages. And one of them is the meeting of the mentor. Okay. And very interesting and how life fitted into this sort of pattern for me, because as we draw up on the day that we arrive to take charge of the boat, this other boater called Bob pulls up beside us in his car and says, and he's got a Brummie accent. He says, "Hello, I'm Bob, and you can borrow my wheelbarrow if you want." And there was our mentor. So, and he had 37 years of experience of boating, so he taught us an awful lot. And I'm still in touch with him. Spoke to him last week. Very grateful to him. So we had to get up there onto the boat, first of all. Now, here's something about boats, especially narrow boats. Space becomes very, very valuable. And my lovely wife, Aisha, has two traits that are almost diametrically opposed. She grew up on jigsaw puzzles, and she's absolutely brilliant at fitting things into small spaces. And as you can see, it's a tiny car. It's a Nissan Micra 2002, 500 pounds, absolutely faithful, reliable, everything else. Aisha managed to fill every spare inch of that car, all right? And she insisted on taking her tutus. And I said, "Have you ever seen a boater wearing a tutu?" No, you don't need it. But they came. And cushions and paintings and crockery, or millions of apparently useful things, all came with us. And then we had to find space for it. So that's something I would say for anyone thinking of moving onto a boat. You really want to think about your possessions and thinking minimalistically, because space becomes invaluable. You've only got a small amount of space. As you can see behind me, our kitchen, and it's kind of maybe got a wide angle feel to it, but actually it is only, so wide. Okay, so up we go. And we go from Richmond, which was well-to-do, lots of history on the river there, lots of boats coming and going, absolutely beautiful countryside, and Richmond Park nearby with herds of deer and anything. Absolutely beautiful, isn't it? And we go from that to here, and you can see the canal is frozen over. And we were going from a beautiful middle-class area to somewhere very remote. No local amenities. There's no pub, there's no shops or anything. It was a culture shock. So there were challenges, and I'm understating it here, but day one, this is I kept a journal. So I wrote every day, partly for therapeutic purposes, I think, when I look back. And I wrote every day what we did, what went wrong, and what we needed. Just kept me sane. It was such a different world, right? On day one, we fumigated ourselves and froze our socks off. All right. Our stove was blocked and the fumes started to fill up inside. We opened all the windows. That got rid of the fumes, but it also made it freezing cold. Day two, I wake up and thinking, oh, the towpath is really misty and gray, isn't it? And I'm literally about to step out and I realize the mist is over the canal. So I nearly stepped right into the water. I also lost the key to the padlock, which also ties into the day three, where we nearly burnt the boat down. And then day three, we ran out of water. That was amazing. I turned the tap on and there's no water, just a couple of drops. That's all that came out. And then at that point, I started to understand that a boat is a self-contained system, and unlike a house or a flat on land, you have to monitor and get all of your supplies. That's water, coal, diesel, and gas as well. So let's come back to the fire, shall we? What I came to discover, as I say, is that we have to become self-sufficient. That in itself is a shock, because normally in a house you flick a switch and a light bulb comes on, you turn a tap and water comes out. And basic things that we need if we're going to survive, and it's October, by the way, and we're going into winter. We need water, electricity, fuel, that's diesel in other words, and gas for cooking with. And the basic skills, we didn't have those either. We need to be able to turn the boat round. Remember, it's 70 foot long. Canals aren't very wide where we were. And we need to learn how to cruise. Now, with the tiller, it's reverse. It's, if you want to go turn left, you push the tiller to the right. So, you know, it becomes automatic after a while. But we had to learn all these things, and it was a real shock. Now we look at the lockgate. This is a diesel fueled heater, quite familiar in homes and also on boats as well. Now, our boat being long, we could warm one end of it, but the other end where I was keeping my journal was freezing cold. So, you know, I said, Aisha, why don't we light the lockgate? And we'll have a go at it. What we didn't know is the lockgate was taking too much diesel from the diesel tank. Anyway, it wouldn't light first of all. So in the end, we said, well, look, we'll get a fire lighter, you know, a block of fire lighter, we'll light that and just drop it down. It's fine. It started to heat up. About an hour later, there's this huge noise. And I said, Aisha, there's a terrible noise from the stern, and we rush in, have a look. The flue pipe going up in the background is scarlet. I mean, literally the metal is scarlet. It's so hot and it's bulging like this, going in and out. And at that point, we realized that it wasn't a fire, it was heat. We thought this could explode and burn the boat down. At that point, we ring the fire brigade. The fire brigade have got rather large vehicles, and so there were 3 of them driving around Warwickshire somewhere trying to find out how to get down onto the towpath, and in the end it had to be a small fire van that came down. And why did I go back in? Because I realized, because we tried to spray fire extinguisher on it, but it wasn't a fire, it was heat. And I suddenly realized I've got to put cold water on it. So I went back in, put a mask on, and in this dense toxic fog, poured 3 jugs of water on, and that took the temperature down. It was a close thing. I managed to burn my hand as well, and they gave me oxygen, and it was incredibly dramatic. And it really was a very rapid learning curve. Another thing that we learned was what boat really stood for. You see, we thought, we'll get this boat, and I can tell you now, in case somebody's going to ask me, they were asking for £30,000 for it, and then we knocked him down to 26.5. But then as you do more work on the boat, so you have to buy this and you need to improve that and everything else. So we gradually discovered what boat actually stands for. It means break out another 1,000, and 1,000 on this and 1,000 on that, new piece of equipment and so forth. So it started to mount up. And there was a boatyard nearby, and he was very helpful at times, but you paid for his labor. So that's where we said, we will lay a new floor ourselves. We will build things ourselves. And this is a kind of, thank God for YouTube, by the way. If you ever need to know how to mend or build something, go on YouTube. There will be a video that somebody has put up. So there we are. So it sounds terrible, doesn't it? You think, why on earth would these people, these innocent landlubbers, do something so stupid as to buy a boat, nearly burn it down on day 3 and go through this hell? Well, there were some benefits, let's be honest. One of the things is one of the canals we traveled down as we gradually made our way back to London was the Stratford Canal. That was like going back in time. It was like entering a magical world. secret England. That's how I describe the canals. And you might see here, this is a really old bridge on the Stratford Canal. And if you look at I call them hobbit houses, top right-hand corner, you can see that it's quite possible that the wooden frame that would have been used to construct the bridge was then recycled to make the roof of the hobbit house. Excuse me. And then we've got an old bridge here. And if you look carefully at that bridge, you'll see the bridge is not joined in the middle. And the reason for that, of course, is that, narrowboats were not driven by engine. Initially, they were pulled by horses. So this meant that the rope could be passed through the center of the bridge, and there would be no break in progress. Secret England. So look at the big picture on the left. That you won't guess where that is, but I will tell you that is the aqueduct over the North Circular in North London. And it looks utterly beautiful, doesn't it? But actually, if you could imagine underneath that bridge, cars are thundering at 50, 60 miles an hour, and we're crawling over at 4 miles an hour. But this is what I mean, secret London, secret England, secret London as well. So it opens up and you start to see the world and your surroundings in a very different way. And you start to appreciate the history of a place. You also appreciate the nature. Here, there are a few canal museums. The one up in the top right-hand corner is me really posing, I'll be honest with you, pretending to be an old-time boater with a couple of mannequins in the background. That's at the Blissworth Canal Museum. And then the other thing about canal folk boaters is that we're sort of mavericks, and we're quite independent. And here at Hemel Hempstead, I had to do a double take. I looked at this boat and he's got a car on the back of it. No, what this guy had done, he'd taken the body of a VW Golf and welded it to his boat. So that's pretty remarkable. And we're just coming on now. I've gone over a little bit. But anyway, eventually, we did get back to London, and 100 miles. It took us over a year to get back, because there are all kinds of hold-ups and problems on the way and so forth, lots of challenges. 77 locks that we went through. I haven't talked about the lock system, but it's a very, very ingenious system, very simple in many ways, but for going up or down hills. And that brings me really to the end of this bit of the story, really. I'll try to encapsulate it. I know I've gone over a little bit here, but just end up here. This is how the book ends, more or less anyway, not quite the final paragraph. On our journey, we faced fire and ice, made countless blunders, ground ourselves to the bone, faced death and disease, battled the cold, navigated serpentine canals, saw wondrous sights, and were thrilled by secret England. And we did get back, and this was our Christmas cards, Christmas 2017. And what Aisha did is she got these twigs and we painted them white and stapled them to the boat, which is very bad for our woodwork, but it was great. And then we had a party and all our friends came, and that time we were at Kensal Rise, and we'd done it. We'd eventually gone on our hero's journey. We'd started off from London, gone into the unknown, faced all these problems, challenges, everything else. And then we came back and joined our tribe, our London tribe. And that is the story of Barging Free in a nutshell. A lot more to it than that, of course, but I hope that's been interesting. And now I think we can open up to questions. Just to say, to purchase a copy of Barging Free, there you go. A signed copy this is. I've got a few copies left. It's normally £9.99, £3 package on postage. I'm not making anything on that. Or if you want to receive a free PDF 5 questions to ask before buying a boat, you can email me, alanjdenman@gmail.com. Right. Okay.
Oh, thank you very much, Alan. That was really interesting. And we've got some fantastic questions as well.
Okay.
So we have one from Jackie. Hello, Jackie. Can you moor up wherever you like on the canals? And is there a cost dependent on the place where you moor?
So I'm just going to repeat the question. Can you moor up anywhere on the canals, and is the cost dependent on where you moor?
Well, I've mentioned before, there's 2 types of mooring. There's free mooring, in which case you have to move every 2 weeks, or there's residential mooring, where you really kind of hire a space from the Canal and River Trust. And in central London, that could be anything from 12 to 15,000 pounds a year. So in effect, you'll end up paying what you would pay for to rent an apartment. So it gets expensive. You want to be careful where you moor up, because there are security issues as well. And the only time we had something stolen was in one of the most remote spots on the Grand Union, which is the main canal coming down from the Midlands to London. And it was very remote, and there weren't really any other boats around. So you want to make sure that you moor up somewhere where it's safe. Sometimes it's not safe because the ground is very soft, or if you're on a river, you could ground yourself as well. So that's where it's useful to have a barge pole, 10 or 12 feet, and you just check the depth of the water as well. Okay, I hope I answered that question. Another question, Kathy?
Yes, from Russ. I think this is going back to the beginning of the event. Where was the first photo taken? As it didn't look like a canal, it looked quite wide.
That's true. That was actually taken on the Thames. So we'd spoken about coming up the Thames for several years. We'd been traveling around the canals of London and going into Essex to Bishop Stortford. And we finally said, right, well, we're going to do it this summer. We're going to go up the Thames. And you hear stories, you see, as boaters, like the Thames, oh, it's dangerous, powerful currents. And, you know, it's the Thames is only tidal up to Teddington. So that's where we are at the moment. We're up on the Thames at the moment. And it is fantastic. Beautiful.
Lovely. Well, welcome to Mal in Seattle. Will this recording be shared? If so, how and where? Many decades ago, my sister lived for a while on a narrowboat. I'd like to show her this video. I'm in Seattle and she's on the East Coast. So I think with the recording, we can contact you, can't we, Alan? Mal can contact you directly and you can send him a recording. So I don't know if you've got that available as your last screen, perhaps?
Yeah.
With your email address on?
Yeah, so are you seeing that at the moment, Kathy? We've got Alan's email up now. I'm just checking. Maybe it isn't.
I can't see it. Is Susie there?
Let's have a quick look.
Yes, do you want me to find it and share the screen?
That'd be great. Thank you, Susie.
Yeah, 1 second.
Lovely. Yeah, so anybody out there who wants to have a recording of this, or perhaps if they know somebody who might be interested in this, you can contact Alan and he'll be happy to share that with you.
Great.
Lovely to know we've got as far as Seattle.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Okay. We have a question from Anonymous, which is, do you find moving every couple of weeks hard work? Yeah, because you're moving house every couple of weeks, aren't you?
Well, I always say to people when they answer this question, something similar, is that most people probably only move a house or flat, 4 or 5 times in a lifetime. Some people move more frequently, but when we were living in London, we were moving every 2 weeks. So it's 26 times in a year. And it does get tiring. But remember what our goal was. Our goal was, could we own our own home and live in London and also take financial pressure off of ourselves? Yeah. So that was very important. So yes, it does get wearing. In winter in London, you can buy a winter mooring, which is not too expensive. Depends. The more central you are, the more expensive it becomes. But that could be anything from 450 a month, Kensal Rise, down to about 160 if you're in outer London. But then you can stay there for 4 months and you don't have to move your boat.
Right.
So
I'm sorry.
One more thing, Kathy, and that is one of the reasons that most boaters have to move their boat is that they need to get water.
Oh.
Right. So you have to find a water point, and there's not that many water points in London either. But what we did to overcome this, we had a water filtration system fitted. So, we could take water from the canal or from the river, filter it, and then use that. And that meant in lockdown, we were stationary for about 5 months, and we didn't move once because we were taking the water out of the canal.
Well, just a quick question from me, actually. What would you do in the case of a doctor or a dentist if you're moving around and sort of moving from place to place? How does that work?
Well, yes, that's a trick. I'm going down for my flu jab on Friday. So we've just kept our original doctors that and the dentist as well. It's a bit of a pain, I have to admit. But especially since COVID, many places are not taking on new patients. So we stick with what is.
Okay, lovely. We have Jane from Aberystwyth.
Hello.
You have a favourite canal?
A favourite canal? Probably two, I would say. One is a river, one's a canal. And the favourite canal is the Stratford. That was a revelation. As they say, it was like going back in time. And then a beautiful river is the Stort in Essex. And the water there was so pure, so clear. You could look down, it was crystal clear, and you could see the bottom of the river. That was really, really lovely. Yeah.
Russ has asked, where's your favourite place to moor up? So perhaps there, is it?
Well, certainly the Stort was really beautiful. Roydon around there. That was one of our favorite places. And we didn't have our pusscat then, but she would have loved it because there were fields to roam in and she likes catching mice and things like that. But that's beautiful.
Well, Jess has asked a question that I've been dying to ask. How do you manage toilets on a boat?
Okay, well, this is all in the book, by the way. So all the information is there, and there are different systems. You can use what's known as an Elsan, which is like a potty. You might find that in some caravans, and you have to empty it every so often. There are Elsan points on the canals in London. They're few and far between. Another system you have is pump out, and that's what we had originally, where you have a large sewage tank and all the waste goes into that. And then if you can find a pump out station, you put a big tube on the top of your boat and it's sucked out. And the other system is a compost loo. So there's three systems that you have. But the disposal of human waste and also kitchen waste as well is something that is a challenge for many boaters as well, because you don't want to have to be carrying a big sack of kitchen rubbish a mile to a bin. You want life relatively easy. Where as I say, what is a boat? A narrowboat like we live on? It is an integrated, fully functioning floating home, but that means we have to get rid of our waste as well. So we sleep, eat, relax on our boat all the year round, summer and winter.
David's asked an interesting question. Do you have any plans to turn your story into a film or TV series to add to the stable of films you already have made?
It's funny you should ask that.
Ah.
Yeah, there definitely we have, because my background before I became a boater was a screenwriter and filmmaker, and we think it would make a great TV series.
Yeah.
So if you to take the book and to break it down into its events and episodes, chapter by chapter, I think it'd make a really interesting, because it's also in the zeitgeist now, isn't it? People are looking to, well, is it possible to live off grid? You know, if energy prices are going up, could we become more self-sufficient? And also, I think people have felt very sort of ground down by, you know, COVID and lockdown and everything else. So there's a sort of freedom element to having a boat as well. I think, oh, I'm just going to move out of London. I'll take my home with me.
Avril has asked, how long can you moor in a place? I think it used to be 2 weeks. When I lived on a boat in Lapworth, it was for 2 weeks. We called the canal homes Hobbit houses too. Wow. So is it 2 weeks and then you've got to move on, otherwise you have to pay a charge?
Yeah, you've got to be somewhat mindful. Most boaters like to stretch the system a little bit. We'll say, and also when the Canal and River Trust are working properly, they do send monitors and they monitor the boats. So what you do is then you find out that the CRT monitor comes on, say, a Monday, all right? So you know that if you can manage to miss him, you might get another 5 or 6 days or something like that. So you end up having almost 3 weeks. But if you abuse the system too much, they will give you a warning. And if you go on doing it, they will suspend your license and you will not be able to live on the canals. Okay.
Right. So we have anonymous. I'm not quite sure what this question is about. Perhaps maybe you know the answer anyway. Are there any dodgy places to moor up in London? Perhaps the question is, are there any places to avoid?
Yes, there are. In fact, the Canal and River Trust do have a London hotspot map where there have been recent break-ins and so forth. So Victoria Park in Hackney is a famous break-in area, and also the River Lee going up through Tottenham is quite well known. Basically, you want to really moor up where there's other boaters and where there's street lights or lights, security lights from other buildings. So and what we did on our boats, we put solar lights on, so they absorb sunlight during the day and then light up when somebody goes past at night. So there are ways to protect your boat, but at the end of the day, you know, you can't protect the boat 100%, but there's a lot of things you can do, and definitely some areas. Generally speaking, I would say West London is safer than East London. That's a vast generalization, and I may get some criticism for that, but that's our experience anyway.
Lovely. Jane has asked, perhaps there's a map, I don't know, is it easy to find a water source?
In London, well, we know where they are in London, and most boaters develop a kind of cyclical pattern where they move. They know where they're going to want to be in spring, so they know where the water point is near there, and they know where they're going to be in autumn, and they, you know, so you know, very important to map this if you're having to fill up your water tank. And sometimes in one place, I won't say exactly where it was, we did observe that there was a tap in somebody's garden as it came down to the canal. We thought, if we just move over there and mid-morning on a Monday, nobody's likely to be in, just attach the hose pipe. And so we did do a few naughty things, you know, and fill up our tank that way. But yeah, it's a challenge. There are not enough water points in London.
So once you've filled up with water to the brim, how long would that last you then for washing up, showering, drinking, all that kind of thing?
Well, this is why we had a water filtration system installed, because Asia is rather fond of baths, you see. And with a water filtration system, there's no limit to the water you can use.
Right.
Basically,
Okay.
for us, I would say 2 weeks maximum, 10 days. Because don't forget, we're washing up, we're having showers and the occasional bath, and we also have a washing machine. So our boat is completely functional, and it has everything on it that we need, but that takes water. So probably for us, about every 10 days. People who are single, they could stretch it out to 2 months, possibly, you know.
Yeah. Okay, Anonymous has asked, where did you stay in London for 5 months, and was it nice staying in one place for 5 months?
Well, it's a mixed answer to that. One is it was relief not to have to keep moving, but we did have our water filtration system anyway. And it wasn't very pleasant where we are, because if you know Kensal Rise, there's a big Sainsbury's there at the top of Ladbroke Grove. And that area is up for massive redevelopment. And there was so much building and dust flying over, and we were right beside it. So it actually wasn't very pleasant. And on the other side, you've got Kensal Rise Cemetery and trees, and there's quite a lot of wildlife. That is something about the canals, that there is lots of wildlife and herons and cormorants and coots and things like that. And just to, on that note, a very quick tip that boaters have cottoned on, that if you hang a tire over your side of your boat and a coot comes to nest in it, then CRT says you don't have to move. So, you know, and there's places on the canals where there's quite a lot of coots, you see. So that's a way of sort of cheating the system a bit. Get a coot on a tire on the side of your boat.
It could be an opportunity there. Rent a coot.
Yeah, or get a plastic one.
Yeah. Jane has asked, it's a very interesting question, actually. Do you come across many criminal types? As I understand, boats are a good place to live with no address.
I think if you look at London, you know, there is a great
sorts of
range
places,
of boats. Some of them are really dodgy boats, you know, and really they shouldn't be on the canals. And people get them because they probably are homeless, penniless, and they think it's a cheap place to live. But they don't know enough about boating. They don't have enough understanding of the canals and the ecosystems there. And so it can be quite sketchy. In terms of criminal types like drug dealers and that, no, I've never come across that. But you get a wide range of some boats that are wonderful boats and boaters who really look after their boats. And then the boat next to it looks like, you know, it's about to fall apart, and you know, it looks a terrible mess. So it's quite a range. Once you get out of London, no, you don't see that.
No.
It's very different on the Thames.
We have Samia, who has asked us, tell us about your cat Lucy, her adventures, any anecdotes. Has
Hello,
she fallen in?
Well, hang on a minute. Is Lucy available? Calling Lucy.
Hang on, she's in makeup.
Hang on. Okay. Here she is.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Lucy the boat cat.
So she's doing well. I mean, just say on this, a question is really a broader question is, you know, is it wise to have a dog or a cat on a boat? The best advice we were given, if you're going to have a cat, have her from being a kitten, so she gets completely used to the idea that the boat is her home. She knows this is where she lives. And you know, Lucy is very adaptable. This is quite unusual because we have moved a lot. You know, she knew that we were moving into a new place. So she'd stand on the window and look out and think, all right. And then we came to trust her that we let her out for a little bit, watch her, and, you know, and then she would always find her way back onto the boat. We also got her because she's part Turkish van. And the van cats from Turkey are famous for being able to swim in water. You go on YouTube and you can see them, videos of them swimming. And she did fall in the canal a few times, and she's actually a pretty good swimmer. So she's doing okay. Hope that answers your question, Samia. She's absolutely fine.
Lovely. What are the most difficult types of locks to navigate?
Right. Okay. Old rusty ones that aren't well maintained. You've got narrow locks. You've got canals like the Stratford and the Oxford that will only allow a narrowboat through. We got stuck in one of those because the water level went down. So sometimes they can be very narrow. But probably the biggest thing is that, having to open them yourself, some open very easily and others don't. And you've got the beam that swings open. And there's one lock I recall in Islington that I've had to call help and say, chap passing by, can you give me a hand? Needed two strong men to actually push the beam open to get the gate open so we could get the boat through. So they do vary. It is a lot of maintenance. I give Canal and River Trust that. They have to be carefully maintained. And there are lock stoppages where they lock closures every year. And you have to look on the website and they'll tell you where they were. That's part of the barging free, of course, is that we suddenly realized that we wanted to get back to London and Braunston Lock was closing and it would be closed for months. And if we didn't get there on time, it was a race against time. If we didn't get there on time, we would be stranded in the Midlands until spring or something like that. But we did. So, yeah, they vary a great deal, I find. Some are easier than others.
Question from David. Is there any reason why you bought a steel canal boat as opposed to a wooden one?
Yes, well, there are a few wooden boats around, but they are continuously linking, and wooden boats are a lot more maintenance. Some of the fuel boats that go up and down the London canals are old wooden boats, and some of those are like 180 years old. But steel is much more, it doesn't have to be caulked, it doesn't have to be sealed. What you do have to watch out for a steel hull is that it rusts. And so you have to get it out of the water every 2 or 3 years and black it. It's just like gooey bitumen that you paint on. You put on 3 layers of it, and that protects the hull from rusting, because obviously if it rusts enough, then water will get in and you'll sink.
So, we've got a similar question, slightly different, from Jackie in Cornwall. Hello, Jackie.
Hi, Jackie.
Is it expensive to maintain the bottom of a barge, i.e. scraping up the build of algae like you do on fishing boats, which have to be brought ashore to jet blast it off? And are there plenty of places to get this done?
Well, you go to a boatyard, and in London, there are a number of boatyards where you can go to get your boat blacked, and normally it's floated into a dock and then the water's pumped out and then there's just space underneath. The first time we blacked it ourselves, and then we said after that we will never do it again. It is a filthy, horrible job. But yeah, you pressure wash it with a very powerful jet of water, get all the crud off, and then you have to go over it and brush it down and really check for any holes and pittings. They may need to be filled. And then eventually, when it's dry, then you black it one coat at a time. So it is quite a lot of work, and it takes about a week. You must let it dry.
Yeah. Okay, Samia has asked, what's next for you? Are you already writing a sequel?
Well, I have plans to write Barging Free 2, but I think it's going to be very different to Barging Free 1, because let's be honest, we know so much now. We're never going to be, innocent landlubbers getting another boat. We have looked at other boats. We recently looked at a Dutch barge. So that's another type of boat that you will find on the London canals and on the rivers. And Dutch barges can be very old, 100 years. We're looking at one in France, but it looks beautiful, and there is a romance to them, you see. And as there is with narrowboats, there is a sort of a lure, kind of a magic, really, I would say, to them. But I said, no, I know what's going to happen. This is an old boat. We get in there, we'll start to discover 101 things that we're doing. And I don't think we want to do that again. So we may, and this might sound shocking to some people, but we may even upgrade to a wide beam. And so that will give us more space. So there's more tutus for Aisha she can buy. And it's a different shape, and, you know, it's much wider. It's a different design issues. And, you know, we are feeling a bit cramped in this now, I think. And I think we want something that is easier to maintain.
Anonymous has asked, do you use biodegradable washing up liquid, soap, etc., to stop polluting the canal?
Yes,
I'm sure you do. Yeah.
Yes, we do. And we try and minimize, you know, it's almost impossible not to spill a little bit of diesel or it leaks out. But what you do to counteract, you spray on some washing up liquid and you see the diesel will just shrink and disappear. But this is very important, is that you realize we are in nature all the time, you see, whether we're in London or outside London, we are in nature all the time, and you develop naturally, I think, a big respect for the environment. So we, you know, yeah, it's a diesel engine there, it's fossil fuel, they're dirty things really, but we try and minimize the amount of damage to our environment and be as eco-friendly as possible. And one of the things that we are looking at eventually, and it's on the way, but I don't think the technology is completely there, is an electric boat. So we wouldn't be using fossil fuels at all. So we're looking at that possibility, but that's probably a little bit way down the line, yeah. I think that's that.
Okay, Jackie, again from Cornwall, I think I can see where she's going with this. If you had a barge and didn't or couldn't live in it full time, could you Airbnb it and rent it out easily enough?
Oh yes, people do. We have thought of doing that, but unless you know what you're doing, you really could sink the barge if you're going through a lock. If you get it caught on what's known as a ledge, known as the sill, and you get your boat caught on that, the boat tips up and then you sink. And if you don't know enough about sort of heating, electricity, it may affect your insurance policy as well. You know, if you have to tell them, we have insurance for our boat, obviously, but that's as long as we're on board. So that may really affect it.
Yeah.
But there are boats we know we've met boats who the owners rent them out.
Okay. Liz has asked, are you planning to take any more long trips on your boat?
Depends what you mean by a long trip. You see, 100 miles, as I said in my talk, 100 miles in a car is nothing. It's 2 hours drive from Birmingham to London. But 100 miles in a narrowboat is actually a very long journey. And I do marvel at the old boaters, the Victorian boaters, and how hard they worked and how much they traveled. And they only had horses, remember, as well. So, you know, on average, I would say cruising for 5 to 8 miles a day is actually quite a lot. If you're going through quite a few locks, that really slows you down, and it's also exhausting. And especially in winter, there's less light. You don't want to be cruising in the dark. You know, even we have a searchlight, but you want to do everything in daylight.
Jay has asked a question. Obviously, you can do this. How do you get your service on a boat?
How do I get the engine service?
Internet.
No, the internet.
Oh, the internet
service.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So here you are, mobile phone. You use this as a router, okay, and you tether your laptop to your phone, and then you pick up the signal for whatever it is you want, you know, Netflix or something. So, you know, we do all our emails, we work online. You can run your business from your boat. The only thing we've found is that there are points, even though Vodafone and the big companies say we have 98% coverage of England. No, you don't. They don't. There are points where dead spots where it drops out, but that's what we do. So you can run an online business on your boat and keep moving.
Okay. Samir has asked, bearing in mind all your hardships and adventures, would you do it all over again?
I thought this question would come up. And I think the answer is, well, knowing what I know now, probably not. It was that year that we spent doing up our boat. What we went through was huge. And it's really a bit like gambling at the table. When you're so far in, you think you might as well carry on. We can't throw the towel in now. We're too far down the line. Mm. And there were pluses, as I say, there were lovely moments and a camaraderie with other boaters as well. And some of the characters you meet as well. And then seeing an otter crossing the towpath as we came back. You see, these are jewels. These are wonderful moments. So I don't want to give that up. But I think, you know, now I'll be 74 in a few weeks' time, and I don't think I want to be doing the same thing all over again. It does keep you healthy, I would say that. Having a boat, you know, there's a lot of fresh air and mooring up and lifting things and so forth. You've got to stay vigorous. That's good, but there is a limit.
Anonymous has asked, are you going to go to the famous aqueduct in Wales? I presume that's that really long one with lots of arches in it.
Yeah,
that one.
Yeah. Well, as long as we've got a narrowboat, we can do that. But I don't. If we have a wide beam, I don't think we get that far. But yeah, I love aqueducts, and I love. Aisha's terrified at the thought of it. You know, it's so high up. But I'm sure we wouldn't go over the edge.
No, you perhaps have to keep the cat in.
Yeah.
I'll just jump a question.
Yeah, go on then.
Sorry, because it's in relation to the wide beam. If you buy a wide beam, would you not be able to travel around the Northern Canal network? Does that bother you?
It does in a way, yes, because I think one of the great things about having a narrowboat. Now there are limits. I think when you get up north, there are locks that will only take a boat of up to 57 feet. So we wouldn't fit in all the locks. But there is something exhilarating about the thought that you can get in your boat and you can just go off to England, anywhere in England. Yeah. And you will see things that very, very few people have seen in their lives. Because most people, you think about it, they live in a town, you know, they go to another town on a motorway and they come back again, and they don't know what's out there. That secret world of Victorian England is out there still, and it's magnificent.
Here's a great question, David. Who would you cast to play both of the lead roles in your film version of your book?
Of course, myself.
Bruce Willis.
My wife. It's a good question, that.
Bruce Willis and Sharon Stone.
Well, yes, except they're American, and there are canals in America to speak of, really. I think you know, there was a series in the 70s called The Good Life, and that was about a couple who dropped out and wanted to grow vegetables and have chickens and things like that. I think you would, in terms of the age, you want to get to a point where somebody in their early 40s, where they've had a corporate job or tried to run a business, and now they've still got a dream and they're not too old and they're going to do it. So in terms of casting at that sort of age group, I think, you know, I think not really young people, but you want to, if I was casting as a producer, I'd say they would appeal in their philosophy and attitude, younger people, but also to older people as well. And the truth is, you know, there are people much older than me on the canals and waterways, you know, people well into their 80s who are still tying up, cruising, you know, and going places, you know. So it's a state of mind. It's an attitude of mind as much as anything, I think.
Okay, two more questions, the last questions. Anonymous, oh, this is quite technical.
Okay.
Why not install an aerial of internet outside? The metal boat acts as a Faraday cage, so the signal would be much worse inside the boat.
This is absolutely true.
I'm glad you understand the question.
Yeah. No, we've faced this lots of times, but what we do, I mean, at the moment, I'll tell you what I'm doing. I've got my mobile phone up to the window, so I'm right by the glass. So I'm the technology there is not encased completely by a metal tube. And we did try once. We went to the Crick Boat Show, to just mention that. Every year in Crick in Northamptonshire is a boat show, and there's a lot of narrowboats there and a lot of people selling technical stuff and boatware and so forth. And we bought an aerial and magnetic, stuck it on the roof, and it was useless. So we've tried various things, and that is something of a challenge, yes. But even there, if you're in a dead spot in the middle of countryside, it may not make a difference anyway.
Okay. And finally, our last question from Russ. Have you watched any other YouTube channels? And if so, which ones?
Yeah. Is it in the cut?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a very good guy technically called In the Cut, and he's quite technical in his knowledge and everything on there. Very well made. He's got a big following. I've got my own Barging Free YouTube channel. Mine tend to be quite often, sometimes quite spontaneous. I just happen to be somewhere and I think, oh, I'm going to film that and I'll make a video of it. So, you know, some of my own videos are technical, and some are funny, some are humorous, some are playful, vary in style. But this guy In the Cut, he might want to look at. He's good. He's solid. Quite serious, but it's good.
Lovely. Well, that's all the questions answered. And thank you so much to everybody who's tuned in tonight. It's really good. We've had quite a big audience from far and wide. So thank you so much to everybody. I think a big thank you to Alan, of course, and Aisha and Lucy the cat, who is still with you, I presume. Yes. She's not sneaked off and gone out the cat flap.
Yeah, well, it's night time. She is very nocturnal, but hang on, she's still here.
Coming in for a last goodbye.
She's still here. Well, thank you very much. And I'm sure if people need to contact you, they've got your details and we will share the link to you to send to whoever would like to see it.
Lovely.
There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that now. So contact Alan, and he can put you in the right direction for the book and for the PDF and for the recording of tonight's show. So thank you to everybody. Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.